And on your screen is John Larson of the 1st District of Connecticut. He's part of the Democrats' leadership team in the House of Representatives. He chairs the Democratic Caucus. Thank you so much for being here this morning.
Great to be here, Susan.
You're in the lead editorial of the New York Times. I'm sure you've seen it already, but let me share it with the audience. Job program for the super committee. Here's what the editorial says. The Representative John Larson of Connecticut, the Democratic Caucus chairman, has introduced legislation that would require the super committee to produce a job creation plan alongside its deficit blueprint. He has suggested adding 4 members to the committee to take on the extra work, or alternatively creating a parallel committee with similar powers that would focus solely on jobs. Tell our audience more about your idea.
Or have the committee itself just take up the issue of job creation and economic growth. The main premise for this, Susan, is quite simple and very germane. We know from the CBO score that if we reduce unemployment to south of 7%, that we can reduce the deficit by more than 25%. And so it seems just very common sense and straightforward to me that what we want to do as part of the charge of a committee to reduce the debt by $1.5 trillion, if we can get a quarter of that down by putting people back to work, the primary goal of the American public, and I'm sure what members heard when they went home this summer, why not? I think everyone, any economist that you've talked to said, you know, we have to have an approach that's going to deal with the huge unemployment question, and this is a path forward. The National Journal came out back in August with 11 ways to put people back to work without increasing the deficit. There's no shortage of plans. Certainly the president is going to lay out one this evening. Democrats have laid it out under what we call our Make It in America agenda, focused primarily on infrastructure improvements and putting people back to work in the aftermath of these horrific storms that we've experienced in the Northeast and the devastation that it's called, having a community recovery corps, not dissimilar to the old CVC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, but putting people back to work, especially young people that are out of jobs and can help in the rebuilding and dealing with some of these communities whose very character has been changed in Vermont and New York and in parts of Connecticut by this storm. So that's the goal, and it's rather straightforward, and I'm pleased with the bipartisan support that I believe it can garner.
Let's talk a little bit about the president's speech tonight, just as,
Sure.
as a tactic. Why do you think it makes good sense for the president to ask for a joint session of Congress to lay out a jobs plan?
Well, I do, and I think any time that you have an issue as pressing as the unemployment crisis that we're facing in this country, it's incumbent upon the president to address the people and at the same time address the body that will have to implement any of his ideas. And so without congressional support, it's going to be very difficult for the president to get through any of his proposals. I don't know what they're all going to be, but we have a strong indication that he feels very strongly about extending the tax cuts that people have received. Otherwise, they'll experience a tax hike that in this economy probably can't be sustained, and also an infrastructure program that will focus on not only roads and bridges, but rebuilding our schools, and thereby help us on 2 fronts, making sure that we're putting people back to work, but also making sure that we're keeping our schools competitive in this global economy.
Let me ask you specifically your thoughts on the extension of the payroll tax deduction. 2%, I believe, is the rollback. I've got a few analyses here that says that it just didn't have the desired effect of having people go out and spend more money to stimulate the economy.
Well, the most undesirable effect, I think, was that most people didn't realize they got it. And that's the common concern you hear from a number of members. I believe it did have a stimulative effect, and I think absent it, it'll be felt immediately by those who recognize that all of a sudden their taxes just went up. I think the larger long-term concern for me, and I think a number of people, is we want to make sure that in a system of Social Security that we continue to pay into that system to make it both solvent and secure well into the future, and as it is now.
On the issue of can Congress work together? I wanted to show you last night, Eric Cantor sent out a series of tweets. And here's just one, all similar themed. Here's what he writes. Plain and simple, my point is good people can disagree. We need to focus on the areas where there is agreement and grow this economy. What's your reaction?
A very positive statement. Happy to hear him say that. That's exactly what's got to happen, and I hope they follow through on it. Good people can disagree, but we need to move this nation forward. No question. I think Eric and myself and others, when they went home, heard very clearly from the public, a pox on both your houses. Stop the bickering and get the job done. Job number one, put America back to work. And that's why I think my proposal that I talked about before, when I say my proposal, I believe that the committee will adopt something. It doesn't have to be my proposal, Susan, but what we need is, and what this committee provides, and it will be the focus of this fall session, is a time frame. This committee has that. It's a very shortened time frame. We only have 40 legislative days, and the committee only has 100 days in which to complete their task. All committees must submit to the super committee by October the 14th their plans and ideas. Wouldn't it be great to see every committee of cognizance both submitting a plan for deficit reduction and job creation and economic growth, knowing that the two are linked, and then having to November the 23rd to present plans to the Congress. And if Congress were to continue in a bipartisan manner, then, well, there'd be a trigger and an automatic vote where the cuts would go into effect across the board and the jobs plan would be voted on up or down. Either way, the American people would be served. But if we work together, as Mr. Cantor was pointing out, not only would it be good here in our country, but we would once again establish ourselves as the preeminent parliamentary body around the globe and demonstrate that in a democracy that's free and open, yes, people can disagree, but we can govern. And I think that's what's at stake here, too.
Before we go to calls, here is a map from NCQ Weekly that looks at state-by-state unemployment. Let's focus in on your home state of Connecticut and tell us what the situation is like there.
Well, the situation is starting to improve under Governor Malloy, who just went through a very difficult session. But in my own district, to see levels of unemployment in our urban areas rise to 20% is just simply unacceptable. And so that's why we think it's so important to come up with a program of work that will put people back to work. Isn't it better so people are working as opposed to collecting an unemployment check? I would much rather make sure that the government money is going towards people getting significant and meaningful training and have them be involved, in this case, as we suggested earlier, in the recovery and the aftermath of storms, or the ongoing conservation that has gone benignly neglected for so many years, and so much work out there for people to do.
For Congressman John Larson, let's get some of your questions and comments. We're going to begin with a caller from Sarasota, Florida. Jeff is a Republican there. Jeff, good morning. You're on for the Congressman.
Hi, good morning, Congressman.
Good morning, Jeff.
I've got a couple of comments, so I hope that you'll bear with me for a moment. And my first comment would be that I think that the job training idea is a very good idea. The only problem is that if you're talking about trying to have the job training impact the restoration of a lot of these coastal areas, I don't see how the timeline would meet up with that. That's one point. My other point would be the first stimulus that y'all passed, you only spent 4% of it on infrastructure. I mean, the infrastructure projects have to be there to actually be done. The regulations, everything has to, the timetable has to work itself out to the end where the project is actually ready to be worked on, all the permitting is done and everything. If you just throw money at states again, I mean, personally, I think when I vote a governor and my state senators and House members in, I expect them to balance our budgets and to deal with our pension liabilities and things of this nature. I don't think that you guys need to throw money at these states to help them with these things. And just lastly, I agree that my party, the Republican Party, needs to work with you guys on jobs. I don't question that whatsoever. We're in a bad climate right now. But I've got to tell you that the one thing that really doesn't help us is when a lot of your fellow party members are out there spinning on Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security and saying that these programs are perfectly set, and if we just raise taxes on people, everything's going to be fine. That's not true. These problems statistically do not work out if you do the math. So I don't see how we can work together when you guys are literally putting these ads out where you're lying to people about these programs and their solvency.
Jeff, thank you for your call.
Well, thank you very much, Jack, and certainly you gave me quite a list. Let me say about the first with the thank you about the education. I think that's important. What I was focusing on in terms of the Community Recovery Corps is that we have, this is without the creation of any new bureaucracy, but just the cleanup work that has to be done immediately. There are an awful lot of people that are out of work, an awful lot of people that could immediately under FEMA, under the Ag Department, or within any of our existing organizations be provided to help so many of these communities, many whose character has actually been changed, help, in the case of Vermont and New York, dig their way out of this and brace again for the next flood. In Texas, where we have wildfires, or in New Orleans and Louisiana and Mississippi, where they've been devastated by floods again, and all up and down the eastern seacoast. We heard from our members last evening, and Bill Pasquarel from Patterson talking about being under 5 feet of water, having to evacuate 5,000 people. There's a lot of work that that needs to be done, and we don't need to create a new bureaucracy. With regard to the stimulus, I think Ezra Klein from the Washington Post has this one about right. What happened, I think, is that we had pneumonia, but thought we had a bad flu. And so the remedy that we provided in terms of the antibiotic in this case simply wasn't enough in the area of infrastructure. And so rather than taking it to its full extent and letting the antibiotic run its course, we gave too little antibiotic in the case of infrastructure, and of course have found ourselves in this kind of a situation. I further agree with you, although certainly the states and municipalities wanted the aid at the time, and their respective states and municipalities needed that budgeting. Many states, as you know, took money that was intended for shovel-ready projects and used it to balance their budgets. Municipalities probably less so. And of course, a third of that money also went to tax cuts that we discussed at the outset of the show, which most people don't even recognize that they received. So I think that there is still room for an infrastructure program. And I think there's growing concern in Congress as people go home and as people are, frankly, living through some of these storms and seeing what the aftermath has done, in the Northeast between the earthquake and now with the subsequent Hurricane Irene. Structural damage along the way only underscores what has been years of benign neglect. I think there is an opportunity here for the parties to work together. Regrettably, it has to be in a short period of time, and in this committee, you would like to see it happen in regular order. But that being said, the American public is demanding that Congress get back to work. And frankly, and I'm glad to hear what Eric Cantor had to say, that we have to work together. And yes, there can be disagreement on how we get to the same goal, but there's no doubt in my mind that Republican members want to see people go back to work. No doubt in my mind that they want to see the unemployment rate lowered so that people can go back to work. And coincidentally, if that also lowers the national debt, isn't that a program that we all can work on? And if we have the same time constraints, and then we don't have to deal with any cloture vote in the Senate, and it's an up or down, unamendable vote in the House of Representatives, there's an opportunity for the public to see results. We have about 40 legislative days left here, and a deadline of December 23rd to produce a bill, or the trigger, so to speak, goes into effect, and there are automatic cuts across the board. And if the committee follows the line I hope they'll take, there would be an up or down vote on job creation as well.
Mr. Larson mentioned Ezra Klein of the Washington Post. Ezra Klein also likes Mr. Larson's job plan. Here is one of his recent columns. It's called Wonk Book in the Post, a jobs plan that might actually work. He writes, Representative John Larson is introducing a bill to add a jobs component to the Super Committee's mandate. Larson is on the right track here. The political system's hard-won insights into how to achieve deficit reduction, or at least how to make it more likely, should be applied to jobs, too. That's Ezra Klein on Mr. Larson's jobs focus for the super committee. St. Petersburg, Florida. Charles is a Democrat. Good morning. You're on for Mr. Larson.
Yes, you had a picture there of William Jennings Bryan.
We did.
Bryant once said that the first duty of government was to make sure that rings were put in the noses of every hog. And unfortunately, that needs to be done with C-SPAN. But we have a structural problem in our economy. Mohamed El-Arian, Peter Morisi, right-wing economists all agree. You know, when Roosevelt came and initiated programs, there was something I heard in my college class. Of course, they were all New Deal economists then, and that was someone had to do something to straighten the country, to give the country. What we have today is a lack of leadership. And unfortunately, some demagogue will come along, capture America, and we'll be in worse shape. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Let me just add a comment from the New York Daily News on the president's speech tonight. It's now or never. Obama has a daunting double task. He must articulate a set of job-creating policies that can pass a GOP-dominated Congress, one that's consistently rejected his previous prescriptions for economic revival. And this is pegging off a caller's comments, he must find a way to reverse what one Democrat termed a growing crisis of confidence in his leadership that is seen as clout crumble along with his job approval ratings. On leadership in this economy.
Well, let me say that the president, heavy is the head that wears the crown, and where the buck stops is usually on Pennsylvania Avenue. But there's no doubt in my mind about the leadership of this president. He's leading in uncharted waters, inheriting an incredible, difficult set of circumstances. Wars on two fronts, $10 trillion in debt, the task of keeping the nation secure as we approach the 10th anniversary of September the 11th, as well as trying to come up with the right remedy and the right solution to get us out of the recession and back on the road to recovery. If you note, he hasn't received an awful lot of cooperation from the other side, and he continues, much to the frustration of people in the Democratic side of the aisle, to reach out to the other side, because he does believe, as Mr. Cantor says, that we all need to work together. He has been dogged and stubborn about that. Now, those who think that that's a sign of weakness or lack of leadership, I think are greatly underestimating this president and his ability. I expect Thursday evening that we're going to hear his plan, and not only hear his plan, ask for Congress either to step up to the plate and do the job, or go back and face their constituents, explain to them why they're not willing to put America back to work. And that's what's needed, is the president to get out, lay out his plan, and then Congress to vote on it. If Congress has got a better plan, put it out there and vote on it.
We're talking with the chairman of the House Democratic Caucus. Next is a call for him from Chris, watching us in Dixon, Illinois. Chris, you're on. Good morning.
Hi, Representative Larson.
Hi, Chris.
I keep hearing in the media that the Republicans want to get rid of the regulations that they state are preventing the job growth. Could you tell us what some of those regulations are? Thank you.
Well, in one of their recent proposals, and let me put this in context, it's not that regulations shouldn't be reviewed on a regular basis. They should. But to gut the regulations of the EPA, of the National Labor Relations Board, to me, just don't seem to be job creators in and of themselves. And why I think it's important to look at all government agencies and to make sure that they're operating in as frugal manner as they possibly can. For example, when I was back in my district and meeting with the SBA, a couple of senior people there said, look, give us the opportunity, give the rank and file federal employee an opportunity to talk about where we think the inefficiencies are, what we could wean out of the system, and we'll find you those kinds of cuts. Don't do these dramatic 30-second sound bites or demean the work of people without us having the opportunity to demonstrate, A, the importance and function, as anyone who just went through these recent calamities saw, our state federal and municipal agencies all pulling together to both save lives and involved in rescue missions that that time to time there's a tendency to forget. So with regard to specific cuts and regulations, everything should be on the table. There should be an opportunity for the American people to take a look at this. I hope in the discussion that's going to be ongoing with the Super Select Committee on the deficit, that both all jobs agenda issues and deficit reduction issues, including suggestions that would come from our own federal employees, would be out there and ready for the committee to dissect and go through.
More on the president. Current.com from when you were home in your district over the break, talking about a town hall meeting. Rick Green writes in a story from just recent August 26, for Larson, who stood on stage at a packed XL Center Obama rally in the fall of 2008 in Hartford, the past few weeks have been about trying to instill new hope in a dispirited state and in Obama's presidency. The dilemma illustrates the difficulty Democrats will face in Connecticut, where Obama retains his highest approval rating among all states, according to Gallup, but even the president's most ardent supporters feel let down.
I think people are dispirited by the economy and dispirited by the lack of jobs. And anytime that happens, Barack Obama's biggest opponent is not any of the current people participating in the Republican primary. It continues to be this economy. And I think that's where the people are dispirited. People still believe in this man. During that same week period, I'm talking to a 91-year-old lady who said, I voted for Hillary Clinton. And yes, I even wrote in her name in November after the primary because I thought she was the better candidate. But I've watched this president, and I've watched what he has endured, and I watch what people are trying to do to him. And I think that it's wrong, and I'm voting for President Barack Obama. And then people come up to me, yeah, you know, we believe that this, you know, that his intentions are right, but why isn't he fighting? And so while the president is negotiating and trying to bring the other side on board, not only Democrats, but I think the perception out there is that people expect him to be more engaged in the fight. Listen, if you watched that primary, the article alluded to the fact of seeing him at the XL Center to an overflow of 17,000 people. We know he has the ability to connect and fight. He also has a responsibility to govern. And I think he has tried to create that balance to the best of his ability, often reminding us that he's not just president. He may be the titular head of the Democratic Party, but he's not the president of the Democratic Party. He's the president of the United States. And that's how he's conducted himself.
For Mr. Larson, next phone call is from Florida. Jeff is a Republican in Oviedo, Florida. You're on the air.
Yes.
Hi, Jeff.
Good morning. A couple of things. Allow me to get a couple of points out here. Number one, Mr. Representative, you mentioned earlier that a lot of people may not see this tax cut, I think, this payroll that he's looking to perhaps maybe extend. One of the problems is when you begin to divide that by the number of people and you look at a per person dollar value, I think you perhaps maybe looking at about $36 a month per person. So although he may say, hey, this is a $200 billion tax cut for the people or whatever, it equates out to perhaps maybe less than even filling up your tank of gas. Number two, you spoke about the infrastructure and spending in the economy. You guys do block grants all the time when you send to states. As it relates to this infrastructure spending, you say that the governors and the states took the money and spent it on other things. That's because you all were negligent in not specifying what this money was to be used for, just like you did many of the other stimulus monies that y'all sent to the state. Number three, you all need to stop. The people are sick and tired of the playing this game where you're playing on emotion. You just gave a story about the old lady. That's all fine and dandy. That doesn't put one penny in her pocket. It doesn't do anything to save Social Security. This president knew when he came into office in 2008 what the problems were. Now he's talking about laying out a plan tomorrow, 3 years later. That's the thing in which people question his leadership, because you knew what the problem was before you took office. They had a debate, he and McCain. So don't act like this just became an issue yesterday. Thank you.
Well, it certainly didn't become an issue yesterday, and he certainly had a plan. We now have an automobile industry that's up and running thanks to President Obama. And by the way, without one Republican vote. He also put forward a stimulus package that everyone has derided without one Republican vote, even though they called for tax cuts, which accrued in there. And while you may suggest that $36 a month isn't much, people where I live, people that are living on day to day, that's an awful lot. And if they could get a tank of gas out of that a month, they'd take it. So it depends on where you live and how you view money and what it means to you. Now, it's not going to be much to billionaires, certainly, and that's why we think, many of us, that the tax code needs to be changed and overhauled. With respect to the package in general, Obama came in with a very specific plan, but I agree again with Ezra Klein. We didn't take the full dose of antibiotics that was needed. There should have been a deeper infrastructure program. There should have been greater investment in the roads, the bridges, the airports, the school systems. That's why the call for infrastructure bank to create public and private sector working together, proposal that's been put forward by Rosa DeLauro in the House, and I believe John Kerry in the Senate. These are and has bipartisan support. At the end of the day, we're going to need cooperation from both sides, which this president has been bullish upon insisting. John Boehner boasted rather proudly that after the negotiations on the debt ceiling that he got 98% of what he wanted. He did. I think it's time for us to get away from who got what and when. The most important thing is to put the country back to work. And what I heard when I went home is the fervor around having this country come together kind of in the spirit that we did after September 11th and recognize that what's being ravished and what's being attacked here is the American economy. And in order to change that, we have to look no further than ourselves. And yes, members of Congress, to step forward, work together, and get the job done on behalf of the American people.
I want to stay with the presidential leadership. I want to show you a couple of tweets from progressives. And here's one, J.B. Fuke, who writes, Representative Larson, if Obama doesn't power up his game, I'm going to bolt. And here's a similar one. We're dispirited because President Obama is acting like the wimp in chief. A wimp can't govern. Let me add one more critic, and this one a well-known name, Al Gore, who's become very vocal this week in criticizing the president for his decision on the clean air standards. Al Gore, Obama bowed to pressure from polluters. Let's just take this one example. Did he make the right decision in this case?
Well, listen, I have great respect for Vice President Gore and certainly everything that he's done in the environment community. And I think everybody's entitled to their opinions. That's what makes us a great country. But unless you're sitting in that seat and unless you're going through what the president is, I think the president has handled these things in a measured fashion. Not always to my liking, and I would perhaps come down on the same side as Al Gore on the environment. You know, I was a proponent of a carbon tax, but a lot of people were, including Mr. Gore at one time, pulled away from that when they thought, well, I don't know if it's doable. What everybody forgets about the president is he's dealing with a Senate that, in essence, can block anything with a cloture bill and a majority-controlled Republican House. So he cannot just move matters. He has to get legislation through by what is doable. Some would argue, and I think the frustration comes, well, if you know you can't get anything through, then let's fight for what you really believe in. And I think the president would love to do that. But he has a responsibility to govern and look people in the eye and try to do everything possible to put them back to work and do what's possible. Notwithstanding, I think this election, and it's pretty clear that we're already into election cycle, will be spelled out based on what people believe and where their values are and where they stand on this economy, where they stand on putting people back to work, where they stand vis-a-vis the environment, where they stand versus health care for the American people. And the president has made that clear, and he's drawn down the lines, and I think it's going to be a very clear battle on the values people have about what's important to them, their economic value, about getting a job and going back to work, their educational values, their environmental values, their pension and health care values. That's what 2012 is going to be all about. In the meantime, shouldn't we all be working together to try to help people that are unemployed to get back to work? And I think that there's a simple way to accomplish that.
Hinesville, Georgia, up next for Representative John Larson. This is Dion, Democrat.
Hello.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hey, good morning. How y'all doing this morning?
We're great.
Doing
Thanks,
great,
Dion.
I don't know if I can explain this right. You know, I mean, I got a lot of thoughts, but I'm going to try and see if I can get your answer on this question. But, okay, like Congress and Democrats and Republicans is let me see, how can I explain? It's a big fight on how to spend taxpayers' money, right? And but my question is, I can't. It's hard for me to say it the way I want to say it, but I think it's more or less. Well, my question is how we pay our government contractors, the people that work for the government. Well, the contractors is the main thing, but I want to know about. We got a fee-for-service policy, so that, to me, that's telling me that we they do the work, and then they charge the government what they want for the work that they already done. Can you understand that?
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is sometimes they go out and get a contract, and then they're able to submit charges that accrue afterwards, or overcharges, change orders that come in because they say the work is changed, and they get more money than the original contract. I believe that's what you're saying, and that's always a matter that is very troubling, and one that should be looked into. You lay out a bid, people bid in good faith, and then the winner of the bid says, oops, and produces change orders that exceed the bid, and it looks to the onlookers as though, hey, that wasn't a fair deal. That's something that always should be addressed.
Ray, watching us in Texas, sends this email. Representative Larson, there are 46 job retraining programs, none of which are working. We do not need any more non-working programs. Put money in the people's hands, and they will create jobs and fix the economy.
Well, I agree with you, Ray, that there are a lot of programs that are out there. There's a lot of jobs trainings programs where we need to train people for specific jobs. And so that is going to continue to exist, especially as we continue to graduate kids out of high school. We just recently celebrated, Lyndon Baines Johnson, 1965 forward, with the creation of the Jobs Corps, where you actually had people go out and get their educational degree and matched up with going into jobs within their respective communities, or in fact going on to get further training in areas that they're needing. The healthcare industry is one that comes to mind immediately, with the shortage of nurses, with the shortages of the personnel that we need to assist from everything from the surgery room to the emergency room. And so your point is well made in terms of, look, don't create another agency to train people. We have enough agencies out there, and our community colleges have got to be utilized to their maximum extent. I believe personally they should be open on weekends and in the evening, so that people can better utilize the technology that's there. I think we ought to, when we talk about infrastructure improvement, we ought to light them up so that everybody in the community can go in there and utilize them in a way that they can get skill and get the training that will assist them either in the current job they're in, or be able to both grow in that job or seek another job. Education is something that will have to be facilitated throughout a lifetime, provided you're getting the kind of skill that can give you the dignity that only comes from work. And I'll close with this, saying that's the most important thing for the American people, is the ability to look across the table at their spouse and their children and let them know that it's through their work and effort that they are able to provide for them, and that they are going to be able to get an education and better their lives. And oh, by the way, they'll have the security of knowing that if something happens to them health-wise, they'll be cared for.
Just a couple minutes left. James Ard on Twitter asks specifically, retrain them for what jobs?
Well, let's start with retraining them for, I'll take my state, for example. We have machinists in our state. We have a big aerospace industry, United Technologies, Pratt & Whitney, Hamilton Standard, Command Aircraft, a lot of aerospace industry where we have an aging population of machinists, and we have the need to bring on new apprentices and new people who understand this. Tool and die industries that amass, I went through and saw billboards standing out looking for people to come to work there. They don't have the skill. So the question becomes making sure that you're lining up the people with the right skills in the jobs that are out there. I mentioned before in the last segment, nursing and medical care and hospitals and assistants that are needed as we look at health care, and especially as we look at the preventative side of health care. So there are a number of areas that we can focus on and match them up. And as soon as you start putting cranes in the air in construction and look at the skilled labor force we need, not everybody needs to go to college and get a liberal arts education, Susan, and we should make sure that they have the ability and the aptitudes to be trained in the economy, not only here in this country, but the global economy that impacts us as well.
We have about 2 minutes left with you, Congressman. Next up is Cape Cod. This is Rick, independent there. You're on.
Good morning, C-SPAN. Representative, my problem is, and a lot of the American people's problem is, the Democratic Party continues to pander to the unions. The only effect of the stimulus program on me is my property taxes went up. More union members were hired. And with the Davis-Bacon Act, hang on, pardon me. With the Davis-Bacon Act and the prevailing wage, it costs entirely too much money for the infrastructure programs. Why is it necessary for your party to pander to the unions?
Well, I don't consider it pandering to the unions at all. I think that people ought to be able to have a decent wage. I think that people who have a decent wage ought to be able to have a benefit. I think they ought to have the dignity that I was talking about before. More often than not, and especially on the Cape or anywhere in New England, you can ask any one of the laborers that has a skill that someone has brought in from out of state that doesn't have benefits, that doesn't contribute to a community, that gets a job that a guy who's been paying the taxes in the community, that sends his kids to school locally there, who buys his goods and services there, doesn't get. Why? Because it becomes a race to the bottom to see who can get the lowest wage. Listen, labor has been under siege across this country, and they have taken rather a heavy hit. But if you go back and look traditionally at what labor has provided, it's provided a strong and vibrant middle class because it fought for benefits like health care and pensions and made sure that that wages were at a rate where people could survive. If you look at the disparity that exists today between the nation's, not even the nation's wealthiest 1%, the 9/10 of 1%, and look at what's happening to the middle class and the enormous squeeze where everything in the middle class has remained stagnant while prices continue to expand. I think people should be taking a second look at labor and their values and what they call for, and assisting and helping the American middle class be able to survive, especially in a recessionary period and a time where it's the middle class that's getting squeezed. No one in the 1% of this country, including in the aftermath of September the 11th or the crash of 2008, has suffered at all or lost income or lost jobs. In fact, they've gained. It's the people in the middle class, and labor has been consistent in sticking up for those people.
As we close, where will your proposal on the jobs supercommittee go, do you think?
I think, well, the committee will take it up, and I'm hopeful that the bipartisan agreement, I'm certainly confident that the Democrats on the committee believe in this. And listen, in talking to both Rick Portman from Ohio and Fred Upton from Michigan, I think they understand the necessity to link job creation with deficit reduction. And to that extent, I think there is a great opportunity here for this country, both for this committee to succeed, and I think all the members want to see the committee succeed, and also to reduce the deficit. At the end of the day, if you can both reduce the deficit and put America back to work, seems like a common sense proposal that people can embrace.
John Larson of Connecticut, the fourth ranking member of the House leadership team in the House of Representatives. Thank you so much for being here this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.